With the FedNow Service, we know that every second counts. We're in the world of instant payments. When you or your customer pays a bill, maybe on the due date or even within minutes of when it's due, it's important to know the payment is final in near real time. As we build the FedNow Service, we're incorporating a payment timeout clock so that you have a defined parameter of time for knowing when the service either rejects or accepts and settles a payment. So today we'll talk about why the timeout clock is important to you, how it works, how it incorporates into our payment flow, and some specifics to consider as a receiving institution. Again, the timeout clock is a very important tool in ensuring we're processing instant payments in near real time. We're providing this parameter so that you know within a defined period of time that your payment is either rejected or accepted and settled. At the launch of the FedNow Service, the timeout clock is 20 seconds, with 5 seconds allocated to the receiver institution for their response to the FedNow Service. We expect the vast majority of payments will settle in just a few seconds, but this 20-second timeout clock provides you a very clear parameter for the finality of your payments. We see as edge cases payments that take the full 20-second length of the timeout clock. The timeout clock applies to 3 payment flows the FedNow Service offers. So why is the timeout clock important to you as an institution utilizing the FedNow Service? As a sender institution, you will know in a reasonable amount of time, 20 seconds, whether your payment message is being rejected or accepted. If your payment message is rejected, you can send a new credit transfer message with a unique identifier. If you don't receive an acceptance or rejection within this time period, you can also send a payment status request. For payment status requests, we recommend you wait 25 seconds, 5 seconds after the timeout clock would have expired, to ensure that the transaction is final. As a receiver institution, it's important for you to understand the reserved 5 seconds within the 20-second timeout clock that's dedicated for your response to the FedNow Service, indicating whether you are accepting or rejecting the payment. 5 seconds is a default. You will have the flexibility to decrease that to 4, 3, 2, or 1 second if you prefer. For both institutions, it's important that you use a reliable time server. If your timing is off even by a few seconds, your transactions could time out through the usage of the payment timeout clock. Let's talk about how the timeout clock will work. First, when does the timeout clock start? Within the business application header of payment messaging, there is a field called the creation date time. This is something we also call the timestamp of the payment. We start the timeout clock based on this field, regardless of when the FedNow Service receives the message. This is to account for any latency from the sender institution sending a payment into the FedNow Service. Throughout the payment processing flow, we continue to check the timeout clock. If the 20-second parameter is exceeded, the payment will be rejected due to timeout. The FedNow Service has a cycle date rollover every day, 7 days a week. Keep in mind, transaction processing and payment settlement are not impacted by this rollover. Therefore, the timeout clock also is not impacted. When does the timeout clock stop? As we're processing the transaction, we send the payment message to the receiver institution. The receiver institution responds that it either accepts or rejects the payment. When we get that response, that's when the timeout clock stops. It's helpful to emphasize the start and the stop of the timeout clock by using our visual on the payment flow. Here we can see how the payment message comes into the FedNow Service. Again, it starts based on the timestamp of the payment message. Assuming sufficient time is left for the receiver FI to provide a response, we process and send the message to the receiver institution. The clock will stop when we receive the institution's response. If the timeout clock expires before we receive the response from the receiver institution, we'll send out a rejection. Otherwise, if the receiver institution is accepting the payment, we go forward with settlement. The steps that follow, including sending the acknowledgement and an advice of credit, are not impacted by the timeout clock. Let's highlight more about the reserve time for the receiver institution. We default this to 5 seconds in a participant's FedNow Service profile. Within the profile, you can decrease this 5-second default in 1-second increments, down to 1 second if you prefer to do so. The 5-second reserve time for the receiver institution is meant to provide a reasonable amount of time for that receiver institution to respond to the FedNow Service. But as a receiver institution, you may decide, based on your technology, maybe you only need 1 or 2 seconds to reply to payment messaging. In that case, you have the flexibility through your profile to make that change. What else should you know? Within the payment messaging, the creation date time cannot be future dated. If it's future dated, we will reject the message. Again, if you don't receive an acknowledgement or an advice of credit, and it's been 25 seconds total, 5 seconds past the 20-second timeout clock, you should go ahead and send a payment status request. If your payment was rejected, you can resubmit a new credit transfer with a unique identifier. If we receive a message with the same identifier, we will reject the duplicate message. Finally, we recommend you talk to your internal teams, your operational and technology teams. If you use vendors or third-party service providers, communicate with them as well. The goal is to ensure all necessary operational and technology updates are in place to support an instant payments environment. Talk through the payment timeout clock, how you're going to incorporate it, and operationalize functionality as you prepare for the FedNow service. Additionally, for more tools and resources to help you get ready for the FedNow service, visit FedNowExplorer.org.